Kate's in the kitchen, and you're invited too. I'm Kate, and this is my kitchen. Today's bread day. I already made some rye bread, and I decided I'm going to make my favorite bread. It's an Italian style loaf. There's two reasons this is my favorite. Number one, it's the easiest bread to make. It's great for beginners. You make this a few times, you'll learn to get the feel of how a bread dough should be and look and how to bake it. Number two reason I love this so much is the simple ingredients. We've got all-purpose flour, 4 cups, a teaspoon of salt, a packet of instant dry yeast, active dry yeast, don't use rapid rise, or 2 1/4 teaspoons, and warm water. That's all it takes to make great bread. Now I am going to add a little bit of flavoring to this. I don't always do it, but I like it. If you have good ingredients, you'll get a good product. I've seen people on social media that are bashing television chefs because they say things like, use good vanilla. They're not being a snob. It just means if you're using only a few simple ingredients, say a sugar cookie, you got some butter, some sugar, some vanilla, some flour, a little bit of salt. The quality of your ingredients really matters because there's so few of them. So I use good butter. I use real vanilla. I use good all-purpose flour, unbleached, unenriched, and then salt, fresh yeast. So I'm going to put those in. And I'm also going to add a teaspoon of garlic powder and a tablespoon of dried basil. I like to crush this up in my hands to get smaller pieces, but especially it releases the flavor more. Now again, the basil and the garlic are completely optional, or you could put other seasonings in there if you wanted to. Oregano, thyme, ground rosemary. I wouldn't suggest whole rosemary. I'm going to give that just a little whisk. We have our dry ingredients combined into the bowl. There you go. Put on my dough hook. I'm going to get this going on low. Always lock your mixer when you're making bread doughs, because when it gets to the end and it's very dense, it's going to rock your mixer. And then I've got 2 cups of warm water. I probably only need about 1 3/4 cups, but I always like to have extra. And you want it around 110 degrees. So I'm just adding this, and the dough is starting to come together. I'm going to give it a second here and see how much more I need. You can smell the garlic and the basil coming up now. It's not just going to fragrance it now, it's going to fragrance the bread when it bakes. Remember, where you live will determine on how dry your flour is. So you may need 1 3/4 cups. You may need a little less if you live in a place where flour doesn't dry out so quickly. And it looks like I'm going to need most of this. Okay, let's take a look at this dough. Okay, you can see that the dough is coming together. I don't think I need any more water, so I'm going to let this knead for 6 minutes. I'm going to let you see how nice that looks. It's soft. It's not overly sticky. It feels wonderful. And once you get used to making bread, you'll know what I mean by feel. I'm going to take the bread out and shape it into a ball. Sometimes you'll see recipes for this kind of bread with olive oil in them. It's perfectly fine to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil when you're adding the water. I just wanted to be a little more of a purist today. Then I've got a bowl that I've sprinkled a little bit of olive oil in. I'm going to rub it all sides. That's my oven. I've got a proofing function on my oven, okay? And then I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap and let it raise for about 45 minutes to an hour until it's doubled in size. Tell me, how easy was this dough? My dough has risen nicely, so I'm going to turn it out onto the board with a little flour. Ooh, it is so soft and beautiful. And I'm going to deflate it a little bit because first thing I'm going to do is scale this out into even portions. So I'm going to weigh it and see how much it weighs in total. "36 ounces. So I'm going to separate this into 3 12-ounce pieces. I'm going to make slightly smaller loaves. Just a little bit over. Okay, that's good. So I'm going to continue on with this process and be right back. I've got my 3 balls, each about 12 ounces. I like to make smaller loaves because then when I bake them for dinner, we just slice one at a time and the other ones will stay hot longer than if you make it one big loaf and slice it. I'm going to cover these and let them rest for about 10 minutes. And then we will shape them into loaves. My dough is rested. I'm going to set 2 of them aside and cover them so I can work with one at a time. I'm going to flatten this out into an oval. I want a kind of longish one. I don't want a short, fat loaf. I would rather have a longer, narrower loaf. If you find that the dough is not stretching the way you want, you may need to let it rest a little more. And I'm just going to roll it over, pinch it down with my fingers, do that again. Then I turn the ends in, do a third roll and pinch. And then the last one, I'm going to drive it down with the heel of my hand, which is really going to pinch that seam together. And just to make sure, I pinch it as well. Tuck your ends under, otherwise they will open up in the baking process. And pinch that in there. And then I'm just going to give it a little shape. I'm going to set it on the pan. And I'm going to go ahead and cut it with my lame. Remember to cut across, not down. These are very sharp. If you cut down, you may go too deep. And then I'm going to brush it with a little bit of olive oil. Just a very light coat. And this loaf, I'm going to give some sesame seed. You could do poppy seed. You could do garlic powder. You could do everything bagel seasoning. They have that at the big box stores now. You can buy it already made and just sprinkle that on, but I'm going a little more traditional with the sesame seeds. So I'm going to set this one aside and continue on with the other 2. I've got my 2 loaves already done. I did one with sesame, one plain. This last one I'm flattening out in a circle. And then I'm going to tuck it back into a ball. I'm actually going to make this one round. When it's a large round one, they call it a boule in France. I'm going to get that nice and rounded. And I'm going to bake this one like this, and then tomorrow I can make a muffaletta for my husband and I. So that's going to go onto the tray. And this one, instead of the diagonal slits, I'm just going to do a little cross and give it just a very light coating of olive oil. And some sesame seed. I did make one of those loaves plain because my grandson does not like sesame seeds, and they are coming over for dinner tonight, so I wanted to make one that he likes because he loves homemade bread. Okay, I'm gonna cover this up and let them raise until doubled in size.